When this woman arrived at the wildlife sanctuary to see the lion she had left behind 8 years ago, she wasn't sure what reaction she would get or if the animal would remember her at all. But when the two finally reunited, its reaction made many people cry. Linda never thought she would step foot in the sanctuary again, but here she was. The park was hesitant to let her in because of how abruptly she had left in the first place. But after much back and forth, she was allowed to come back as a full-time caretaker. However, as she looked around, Linda couldn't help noticing how much everything had changed since she was last here 8 years ago. But she was hoping that at least one thing remained the same. A staff member was with her, leading her through the park, noting the drastic changes they had made. The management had decided to move the lion enclosure towards the far end of the property in order to give them more privacy, and Linda had been put in charge of taking care of them. As the staff continued to talk to her, she couldn't help feeling the nervousness building up in her. She had also been in charge of looking after the lions when she was here 8 years ago, and there was one animal in particular that she was almost afraid to meet. Since she had left without warning, she wondered if Marvin would still remember her and how he would respond when they saw each other. He might completely ignore her or even attack her if he had grown aggressive since the last time they had been together. However, Linda didn't have to think about it for much longer. Soon they arrived at the lion enclosure, and she took in the sight. There were more lions now, but still, one stood out from the pack. Marvin was resting on top of a rock, high above the rest, watching as the other cats rested and the cubs played around. "Marvin?" Linda shouted, but the lion didn't respond. She shouted again, this time even louder, causing the big cat to look at her. Marvin continued to remain on his spot, not moving, but his eyes never strayed from the woman staring back at him. Linda saw the moment that Marvin recognized her and couldn't help but smile a little as he finally stood up. With a thud on the ground, Marvin jumped down from the rock and started to approach Linda, despite the staff telling her not to. She opened up the small barbed fence separating them and decided to go in. She still wasn't certain about how Marvin felt, but she couldn't help her excitement. This lion was the reason she felt guilty when she realized she would have to leave her job, and also the main reason why she had decided to return. In 2009, Linda worked as a safari tour guide, a job that she loved. Every day there was something new as she got to interact with the animals and also introduce people to how beautiful nature can be when preserved. Most times, the wild animals tended to ignore the excited tourists and keep going on with their day. But on certain rare occasions, some would approach and give her and the tourists something to remember forever. Some animals would also try to attack as they perceived the van to be a new type of prey, but Linda already had enough experience learning how to deal with those situations, and no one ever got hurt. Afternoons were usually her favorite time to give safari rides, and as the group got into their car, they slowly explored the sights. They first saw some giraffes, and Linda took a little detour to show the tourists some elephants that didn't stay too far away. The guests were impressed, and Linda took a lot of joy in answering their questions. As evening began to approach, she decided to end the day with a special surprise for the guests. As they drove around the safari, Linda made sure to leave the lion's territory for last, as an eventful way to wrap up the day. Lions have gotten a reputation for being majestic animals, and there was something about them that always made tourists extra excited. Linda informed the tourists of their impending destination, and soon they began to spot a couple of lionesses. They were already done hunting for the day, but some of them still approached the van to inspect it. Others mostly rested about or completely ignored the people that were busy taking pictures. Linda took some time to explain more about the lions and the dangers they faced. The government was trying its best to protect the animals, but it was a challenge to keep people away from the area because it was large and the guards couldn't be everywhere at once. But before Linda could complete her train of thought, there was a loud bang in the distance. The sound was unmistakable. Gunshot. She immediately radioed over safari guides in the area, informing them of what had happened. She also reached out to one of the officers that regularly patrolled the area asking for backup. As she tried to wrap her head about what had happened, Linda heard the sound once again, followed by two more. There was nothing she could do, and she also didn't want to put the confused tourist in danger. She offered a quick word of apology and drove back to the hotel, where she dropped off the guests. Then she headed back to the lion's territory, worried about what might have happened. By the time she arrived there, officers were already on the scene. They were examining the damage. Linda noticed some lionesses lying on the ground, injured from the attack by the poachers. There were already vets on the scene trying to help them recover. Most of the lions in the area had already run away, and Linda's heart sank. She knew that the lions were never going to come back to their territory now that they had been scared away, and she couldn't blame them. She joined the team to try to track down the poachers. The vehicle they had escaped in left tire tracks on the ground, and during her time as a guide, Linda had learned how to track and locate in case a guest got lost. Linda walked slowly, looking around the tracks and the surrounding bushes in case there was anything that the poachers left when they were trying to run away. She spent over 2 hours trying to track down the perpetrators, but as the sun continued to go down, it was hard to continue the search. One of the other guides suggested that they call it a day and return back the next day to continue, and all of them agreed. As she turned around to return back to her vehicle, Linda heard a sound. It was tiny, but something that she immediately recognized after spending so much time in the wild. She heard the sound again and was able to trace it to a small shrub. Linda had checked the place several times in an attempt to uncover something, but she had failed to notice that there was a lion cub there. It was alone and most likely scared about what had happened. Linda realized that the cub had been abandoned as the lions had tried to escape to safety. Thankfully, it was completely unharmed. However, leaving it alone could be dangerous. This wasn't the first time poachers had appeared in the area, and she was certain that this wouldn't be the last. Also, there was a low chance of a cub surviving without the help of its mother, and she couldn't bring herself to go back home without it. Linda slowly picked it up and carried it back to the van with her. When she arrived back at the guest house, she informed her supervisor about what she had found, and he gave her the permission to take the little lion home with her. Linda also received some food for the cub and some advice from one of the vets still present on how to take care of it. The cub stayed with her for a couple of days, and Linda couldn't help but feel love for the little creature that she stumbled on. She hadn't planned on letting it stay with her for too long, but coming home to it had been the highlight of her days, especially times when she returned home tired from her activities of the day. But Linda began to think of how to properly care for it. She sought permission from the safari team and got into contact with a wildlife park in her home country of Australia. She had heard about the park and the work they did rehabilitating African lions and helping them survive and thrive. She believed that the new environment would be a good place for the lion to be. After a month of back and forth between Linda and the park, she got approval to travel with it. Seeing this as a new phase of her life, Linda resigned from her job and traveled back to Australia with the lion cub. She had named it Marvin because the name represented the fun and friendly nature that the cub embodied. She had also spent most of her free time learning more about lions in preparation for her new role. When she arrived in Australia, Linda's first call was to the park where the little lion cub was immediately taken in and checked by the park's expert vet team. The sanctuary was a beautiful and serene place. Lions and other animals cohabited together, and they were all well cared for. There were specific caretakers for each group of animals, and their care was specifically tailored to the needs of the diverse creatures. Being there made Linda certain that this was going to be the perfect place for Marvin and the best place for her to have a fresh start. Since they arrived at the sanctuary, Marvin had already captured the hearts of those around. This was the first time that they were going to have a lion cub in the sanctuary, and it was a special moment for everyone present. Linda also signed up to become a caretaker and had to go through the registration and trial process in order to work at the sanctuary full-time. Due to the special bond she had already built with Marvin, Linda was assigned to be his primary caretaker. She spent most of her days with him and taught him everything he needed to know. Because of her, Marvin quickly adapted to life at the sanctuary and began to have a cordial relationship with his other caretakers, as well as the lions that the park already had. Linda watched him grow from a small, helpless cub to a strong and powerful young lion. He had picked up some lessons from the older lions and was beginning to interact with the lionesses that the sanctuary had introduced. She loved Marvin as if he were her own child, and despite his wild nature, the animal loved and respected her too. Other caretakers were worried that at some point Marvin would attack and hurt her, but that never happened. He was rapidly becoming one of the biggest lions, but was still the most friendly since he had been raised with humans very young. In time, Linda took up more responsibilities around the park and now spent little time with Marvin, knowing that he didn't need her anymore. She missed playing with him as a cub, but she was glad that he was thriving at the sanctuary and was happy that she could still see him every day. Unfortunately, that was about to change. During one of her days at work, Linda received a disturbing call. Her mother had been sick for a long time, but received good care from the nurse taking care of her. However, things had taken a worse turn. The doctors weren't sure how much time her mom had left and asked Linda to return home if she could. The thought of not being there for her mother was something that Linda could not imagine, and it wasn't something that she was going to think twice about, so she sent her letter of resignation to the sanctuary and was at the airport the very next day. She hoped her explanation would be enough. She felt sad that she was going to leave Marvin this way, but having to tell him goodbye would have made it harder for her to leave. And now she was back here, looking at him. As she entered the enclosure, Linda stayed close to the fence and waited for Marvin to come to her. And when the lion was close enough to her, she received the surprise of her life. Marvin roared and stood on his hind legs. He was even bigger than she remembered him from up close, and for a split second, she worried he might attack her. The staff who had gathered around the enclosure gasped, and someone shouted to grab a tranquilizer for the lion. But then, something shocking happened. Marvin leapt forward and hugged her. His large paws wrapped around her neck, and he rubbed his large mane on her face affectionately. A massive smile spread across Linda's face as she responded and wrapped her arms around him in response. When he dropped his legs to the ground, Linda rubbed his mane, telling him how much she had missed him. She was sorry about the way she'd left him, but now she wouldn't have to go away ever again. Linda had been with her mother during her final days and was grateful that she could be present. She decided to take some time for herself to mourn and travel to different places around the world to explore and learn more about animals. Now that she had returned, she felt like a different person and knew that this was where she had to be in order to make the most impact. Drying their tears after the heartwarming reunion, the staff explained that Marvin had noticed her absence a few days after she left and was reluctant to let anyone else attend to him. It was hard to get him to respond positively to another caretaker, but when he realized that Linda was not going to come back, he accepted them. In the 8 years that she was away, Marvin had become a father to 3 cubs, 2 male and 1 female. The 2 male lions were growing up rapidly and were almost as big as their father, while the young lioness was still very small. Thinking back to how alone he had been when she'd found him, Linda was happy that he now had a family that would always be with him. Linda was assigned to be Marvin's primary caretaker once again. During her role, she got a chance to meet with the new members of his family and succeeded in establishing a bond with them. Marvin still considers Linda to be his mother because she had raised him for most of his life. Linda was one of the few people allowed to have contact with Marvin and the rest of the lions, and she was grateful that she had managed to establish a long-lasting friendship with the most unlikely animal she could ever have mothered. What an incredible story! Do you think Linda should have taken Marvin away from his natural habitat? Would you step inside the enclosure of a wild animal you cared for in the past? Make sure you share your thoughts in the comments, and see you in the next video.